Hey, this is Matt Edmundson, e-commerce entrepreneur and podcaster. Listen, if you are wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Dennis Giannoutzos.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutzos.
Hey, welcome to the show, Leadership is Changing. What we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Leaders everywhere confront similar obstacles because people are people, but everywhere you go, leaders are overwhelmed, disrupted, and under pressure. They run from email to email, meeting to meeting. Many leaders are not changing quick enough, which means they run the risk of becoming irrelevant and being left behind. The purpose of the show is taking our listeners' leadership to another level by finding their balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. I believe we don't have enough effective leaders in the world today, and if we can get the leaders to step up and lead change, then they can inspire real change. Hey, listeners, it's now time to adapt in our fast-moving world. I want to welcome you to today's episode. I have a gentleman here who's based in the UK. His name is Matt Edmundson, and Matt is the CEO of Aurion Digital. He's very well versed in the e-commerce, and he is an e-commerce entrepreneur. His sites have generated over $75 million in worldwide sales, and he coaches, and his clients have a combined turnover over $100 million. Matt also has his own podcast called the eCommerce Podcast. Matt, a massive welcome to you to the show.
Oh, thank you, Dennis. Great to be here. I'm enjoying this. It's first time talking to someone on the other side of the world in podcast format. So this is very exciting for me.
Awesome. Whereabouts are you based?
Liverpool. Yeah, Liverpool, England.
Yeah, Liverpool, England. Yeah. And of course you support Liverpool Football Club?
Of course. Actually, there's a funny story. You know, I went to university in the 90s, and I chose Liverpool University. I wasn't born in Liverpool. I came to Liverpool in the early 90s. I chose the university not because of the grading of the school, not because of the outstanding instructors, not really because of the course structure, if I'm honest with you. The only reason I chose the university was so I could be closer to Liverpool Football Club.
Nice. So, whole life about where he's going to go in life and career, and then he thinks about the football club. That's awesome. Well done.
Yeah, you put your football club first and everything else seems to take care of itself.
Everything else will follow, yes. Nice. Very
That's
good.
not a real life motto, but it just happened to work out in this occasion.
Most people set the goal and everything will happen and go for it. Nope, I'm going to be near my football club and that's all good.
Yes, absolutely.
Nice. So, Matt, I've given the listeners a little bit of a background about you. Tell me more about you.
So I, like I said, live in Liverpool. I've been here, like I say, since the early 90s. I'm married to the most beautiful lady on the planet. Happily married for over 20 years. I have 3 amazing kids. I still get on really well with my kids, have a great relationship with my kids. So for me, that means I'm successful, I suppose, in a lot of ways. And yeah, I love my life. I run my own businesses. We do e-commerce, kind of stumbled into it by accident, as you do. It's funny you mentioned about most people, they set a goal and they chase after it. That is, I could almost write a book called The Ungoal Life or something like that, because it's definitely not my story, at least not my usual story. Stumbled into e-commerce and built and sold my first e-commerce business in 2002. Fell in love with the whole thing. And here I am almost 20 years later, still doing it.
Wow, that's awesome, man. So, maybe the book could be Setting Goals Sucks or something like that.
Yeah, I like your title better. Yeah, let's use that one.
And so when you said, about success in life and so forth, it's really amazing what success means to a lot of people. I worked for a guy when I was living in Greece for 5 years, a billionaire. Had 30 companies under his group and things like that. But everywhere he went, he would have 2 bodyguards go beforehand for a couple of hours, checking things out. Had 6 guys around him all the time. Couldn't go to the bathroom without the guys going in and checking first. And I'm like, is that really success? I don't know. I mean, it's really amazing. And then you talk about what you're talking about your kids and family life and things like that, and that is maybe success. And I'm like, yep. I mean, it depends for everybody, but sometimes it's just the simple things in life that make you successful.
It is. I think it comes down to clarifying what it is that's important to you, and making sure that actually you succeed there first.
Nice.
it became apparent to me early on in my career. I was in my early 20s, and we have this thing in the UK called the Times Top 10 Rich List.
Yep.
And it lists out the wealthiest people in the UK. Well, at the time, I designed and installed quite luxurious health spas, like saunas and steam rooms and things like that. This was sort of pre-internet days. And so I would spend a lot of my time designing spas and laying them out. And I got to know a lot of the people on the Times Rich List, on the Times Top 10 Rich List. In fact, at one point in time, a large chunk of them were in my mobile phone, and I could call them up and I would talk to them. I've been on their private jets. I've been in their very expensive ski chalets. I've been in their very expensive homes. I've seen art which cost tens of millions of pounds on the wall. And do you know what? One of the things that was sort of common to all of them was none of them really succeeded where their family was concerned.
Wow.
And it absolutely fascinated me. A lot of them had estranged kids, or they'd been divorced many times. And it's like, I appreciated they'd worked hard and they succeeded from a wealth point of view. But for me, success is more than just about money. I have this thing, the sort of the 5 areas of my life that I look at, and that's just one of them. So I learned this very early on. It's not just about the money. You've got to succeed in other areas as well. And I'm glad I learned that lesson young, let me tell you.
Yeah, wow. That's fascinating. And I think massive lessons for you in learning from those kind of people and stepping back and actually reflecting on, their lives and so forth. But yeah, it's not always just about money. Interesting. How did you get into leadership?
Again, I think it's more by accident. I think fundamentally one of the lessons you learn in life very quickly is actually if you're going to do well in anything, you need to work with people. As much as, the digital nomad, I can work by myself on a beach lifestyle appeals to a lot of people. The reality of it is if you want to build a company, you have to work with people. And so leadership then becomes one of those things that you have to do. You have to learn. You have to learn it if you want to build a business. You have to learn it if you want to build a family. You have to learn it if you want to better yourself in any way, because self-leadership is one of those things that is, a super important topic, mastery of self. So leading yourself, your family, your kids, do you know what I mean? It doesn't matter what sphere you're in. Sports, talking about Liverpool Football Club. Liverpool Football Club is the epitome of phenomenal leadership right now. And so you've got to get on with people. You've got to work with people, and you have to lead people if you want to achieve something more than just, what you can do with your own skills and talents.
Yeah, it's interesting. And the football club is an example, and I think a lot of businesses, and even right down to family units, if I can put it that way, if you see a well-oiled machine or an organization whereby it does come down to people and it goes really well and comes along, it's amazing where it goes, and the performance, the productivity, the experience, the fun, the love, all of that has been shared. It's really amazing to see how that comes along. When an organization or a family or something, a unit is not going well, it really shows and sticks out.
Yeah, it does.
It does indeed. Now, you may have many of these people here, and it could be those people, those rich listers that are on your mobile phone previously. This person could be alive or from history, but who's your favorite leader and why?
Without getting too political or religious, I suppose for me, historically, the most impactful leader in all of world history has to be Christ. Do you know what I mean? For me, it's an undisputable fact. And so if there's one guy I wish I could sit down and have a cup of coffee with, do you know what I mean? Or enjoy a chippy lunch or something like that, it would be Jesus without any shadow of any doubt. And I think the spread of Christianity, both from, its good points and its bad points. Don't get me wrong. There's lots of horror stories, but there's lots of great stories with it as well. For me, that's got to be the one. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'd love to sit down with Churchill. I'd love to, do you know what I mean? There's certain people that I would really enjoy sitting down with that have sort of come through history's stories. But for me, Christ would be the one that I'd be like, yeah, okay, that's the first conversation I want to have.
Conversation? What do you reckon you would ask?
How did you take, in effect, what was 12 ordinary people and change the world history? And in fact, when you think about it, it wasn't really 12, it was 11 because one of them betrayed him. And do you know what I mean? So you've got 11, some of whom we know a fair bit about from history, some of whom we know very little about. But how did you take 12 ordinary people and lead them in such a way that the whole of history was subsequently changed? Because today, the whole thing today in modern industry is you've got to hire the superstar, right? You've got to, you work in the digital industry. Well, I work in the digital industry. And there is a massive emphasis on recruiting the best possible talent. We go and get the best people and we'll pay the crazy salaries and we get the best people to offer the best service. Here was a mob where that didn't seem to happen. Do you know what I mean? It was just regular Joes, how do you turn ordinary people into extraordinary people?
Yeah.
And I thought that would be for me one of the key questions.
Yeah.
Especially as it relates to business. Yeah.
Yeah. Turning ordinary people into extraordinary people. That says a lot, huh? And so even think about a leader or an organization that might have 12 direct reports. One might leave. It's called the Great Resignation, right? Turns their back on them or goes off and starts a competitive organization. There's all sorts of, you can sort of put that kind of same scenario and story around different areas as well. But I really like it, taking ordinary people and turning them into extraordinary people. And if you sometimes do that, and in life, because I think sometimes, what we should be doing is taking those lessons and putting them into life. And if we step back, I mean, one question I would like to have asked him was, how did he do that? I mean, it was just, okay, we read about it and so forth, but how did he do it? And what was his sort of goal there and what he was trying to do? And yeah, it's quite, sometimes I think, Matt, just diving a little bit deeper into those kind of conversations would be wonderful, eh?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think it would be absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. I wonder who would pay for the bill. Yeah, or I know. I think it'd be you, right? I mean, who cares?
Yeah, I don't mind. I genuinely don't mind. I'll pay it. That's fine. Unless it's turning water into wine, in which case I'm out. There you
go. Yeah. Hey, the title of the show is called Leadership is Changing. And Matt, when I mentioned that, what does that mean to you?
I think it's a really interesting phrase because when I think about some of my billionaire friends that I've met over the years and their style of leadership, there's one particular guy, I won't mention his name, but there's one particular guy who I got to see his leadership style in very dramatic fashion. Do you know what I mean? And I could follow him around and I shadowed him at work and he was great and he mentored me a lot. But he was what you would call the command and control leader, right? He was very much in the detail. He was telling people what to do. He was telling people off at every opportunity. He had fear instilled in his staff. And because of his wealth and because of his success, the people put up with it. Do you know what I mean? They thought he was fair, but no one ever wanted to lead like him, which I thought was fascinating. And a lot of when I grew up, that was leadership. We assumed that leadership meant I was in charge. And it was one of the big wake-up lessons when I started leading my own company. There's a wonderful lady that works with me. She's worked with me for almost as long as I've been running my businesses. She's my right-hand man, for want of a better expression, a lady called Michelle. She's brilliant. Totally love the bones off this lady. But she do not like telling me what to do. And every now and again, I do say to her, Michelle, listen, I'm sure the last time I checked, I was the majority shareholder in this business. She's like, I don't care. And it was like, it's one of those that I think leadership no longer means being in charge in terms of I'm the boss and I'm going to tell you everything that you do. I think leadership is much more now about empowering people and about releasing people and about being humble and not being afraid that people are going to shine better than you and do better than you. And I don't think that was true when I started my entrepreneurial journey. I think that's been a massive shift over the last 20 years. So when, your podcast, Leadership is Changing, I think is a spot on title. And I think there has been some massive changes, both in culture and society, certainly in the big five, in the UK, the States, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. You see these amazing shifts in leadership, style and structure. And you've got to run to keep up, I think. It's almost as fast as the changes in technology. And whether the two are linked, I don't know. But as technology has changed, I think leadership has evolved.
Yeah, and I see business, I see social from a social perspective, technology, leadership. It is moving so fast, really, really fast. Have you seen your industry or your business change much over the last, say, 2 or 3, 5 years?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Because e-commerce is a digital business. And because of technology changes, every 2 years, it looks completely different. And you have to have this mindset which says, what I'm doing now, in 2 years' time, I'm probably going to have to either reinvent it or redo it or rethink it, right? So I say to businesses all the time, if you've got a website that's older than 2 years, you're already well out of date, right? And it just is what it is. And I think in all the e-commerce businesses that I've been in and that I've run or that I've coached, there are timeless principles which have always remained, but there are tactics which change on a daily basis. Do you see what I mean? And so when you think about leadership, you can go back to the time of Christ and you can go back and say, well, actually, they must have liked him. They must have respected him. And so modern day leadership, if you're leading and you have respect of people, that's a winner, right? That's a timeless principle. We love that. We think that works. Of course, what Christ didn't have is the tactics that I have available now, like simple things like Zoom or Slack, do you know what I mean? Or Trello, or all of these productivity tools. So this is what I mean. The principles, I think the majority of the principles are consistent. The tactics, the way we achieve it, I think has changed quite a bit.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. And it's actually quite interesting to sit back and watch, and particularly if it's not in your industry, because I mean, if it's not in your industry and you step back and look at other industries, you're a little bit, you don't have that bias, right? So you're a little bit looking at it differently. But yeah, and it's quite interesting to see the different industries, the different organizations, the different way we do things, how it's changing, and but it's going to change again in 2 years' time. You're right. I mean, we have to be on the go all the time in the sense of thinking about things. And do you think that leaders, based on what you just said there about changing sort of every 2 years, how do leaders stay ahead of the curve? What should they be doing to ensure that they're going to stay ahead of the curve and understand where industry's going and so forth?
I think for me, one of the things, I mean, I can't answer for everybody, and I think for me, what I can tell you is what I do is I have this desire to constantly learn. And I think if I see success as a journey and not a destination, that really old axiom, isn't it? That success is a journey, it's not a destination, is true. And that if I'm not growing, I'm, what's that phrase? Stagnant water stinks. And you've got to have this mindset of growth. And you can call that what you like, whatever works for you. I've got to thrive, or whatever the buzzword is at the moment. It basically talks about growth. I've got to grow physically in terms of I've got to, exercise. I've got to grow mentally. I've got to grow spiritually. I've got to grow economically. I've got to grow in my relationships, the 5 key areas of life. And if I'm experiencing growth in each of those areas, I think we do well. It's when we sit back and go, man, I've got this, and rest on our laurels, that we struggle. Certainly that's when I struggle. And there's this real interesting tension between going, I'm good at my job and I'm good at what I do and feeling that confidence, but also being humble enough to go, I still need to grow and I still need to learn. And, I think that you need both to make this work. And for me, I come across people who are too humble, who think they'll never be good enough. And I come across people who are too arrogant, who think they are the mutt's nuts. But the people that I like, the people that I want to hang around with, the people that I want to follow are the people where you see a good combination of humility, and, real security in who they are.
Yeah, nice. So we live in a really fast-paced life that we're talking about already, and it's always ever changing. What do you think that makes a leader successful today in that fast-paced, ever-changing world? You may have already tapped into it, but is there anything else you might want to add?
There's a saying, isn't there? It's quoted or it's attributed to Margaret Thatcher. Whether actually Thatcher said it or not, I don't know. But she said, apparently, being a leader is a little bit like being a lady. If you have to tell people that you are, then you're not. And so, do you know what I mean? If you have to tell people that you are one, then you're not. So I thought it was a very, very interesting statement. And today, there are so many people who say, I'm a leader, I'm the CEO, I'm this. And, they give themselves all kind of grand titles, but there's no one following them. And I think, if you're successful at leadership because people follow you fundamentally. And I'm not talking about Instagram followers. I'm not talking about likes on Facebook, although that might be part of your tribe and where you reach people. I'm not even talking about the size of your email list or your paycheck, but fundamentally, are people following you? And I think that for me defines a good leader. You've got to have the balance, like I say, for me across these 5 areas, which again are economic health, relationship health, spiritual health, what I call soul health, my mind, my will, my emotions, and then body health, how well I'm doing physically, how much rest I'm getting and all that sort of stuff. So I think you've got to have a good balance across all of those. But I think, and you've got to have that humility and you've got to have that self-confidence, but fundamentally, if you're a good leader. People will be following you. Simple as,
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of times it's if you're out taking a walk and you turn around and people are following you, then you're a leader. But if you're not and you turn around and there's no one there, you're just going up for a hike by yourself, by the sounds of it. Actually, what I've just done, I've just posted on Facebook that, I've got all these people who follow me as friends and so forth on my personal profile, and I need to what I'm wanting to do is sort of make that number smaller and then grow it again, but with people who are that I want to grow with and they want to grow with me and so forth. So I'm about to do that. And so I posted this just letting everyone know that, hey, I'm about to change this and going to reduce the numbers. And next minute, I've got all these people messaging me or putting comments and liking it that I've heard nothing from for years. And this is what they're saying. Comments like, I'm loving your podcast, so inspiring. Hey, I always love following you. You're so inspiring. I'm like, so sometimes what we do is we do things, but we don't always know what we're doing because not everyone's telling you. And I'm not saying that we need to be there for people to tell us. I'm not saying that at all. But it's about sometimes we as leaders need to go and do things, but be careful what you're doing, because in the sense that people are watching us all the time. We just don't know that they're watching us. And it's a part of that following as well, which I think is really, really important for us to think about. You and I have been talking about leaders and through their lenses and so forth. If we flip that now and think about employees and look at through their lens and so forth, how has employees' expectations of leaders changed?
I think if you put it in the context of business and, the 9 to 5, as in, I'm going to work. When I started work, my understanding expectation of leadership is very different, I think, to what people have now when they go to work. And I think 20, 30 years ago, you had the mindset, I'm just lucky to have a job. And now the mindset is, you're lucky to have me as a member of your team. Right. And I think it's shifted. I think there's a massive shift that has happened, both good and bad, if I'm honest. And so I think employees, especially, and can I just preface everything I'm about to say with, I know I'm stereotyping and I shouldn't, but at the moment, I can't think of a better way to do it. If you are an employee that is a millennial employee, you kind of grow up with this knowledge and understanding, and you were always told that you would change history, that you would, and you dream it, you can be it. If you can dream it and conceive it, you can have it. All this sort of positive kind of reinforcement, the Tony Robbins stuff, all this kind of, you can have it, you can totally succeed in whatever you do. You're amazing. You're a superstar. And you see it on talent shows all the time, like Britain's Got Talent, and the parents bring their kids in and they sort of wheel them on and they go, my daughter is amazing. She's wonderful. My dad told me I'm amazing. I've got an amazing voice and that I make angels cry when I sing, and they do, but for entirely the wrong reasons, because, dad never actually gave her a dose of reality. And what we've seen in the workplace, a massive thing we've seen in the workplace is, of course, the millennials, they come to work and there is the grind. 90% of life is boring, and they get there and they're not changing the world. They're not changing history. They're not special. They're not unique. They're just the same as everybody else in the workplace in some respects. And so there's this cataclysmic shift which has happened, which says, I must be in the wrong place. And so they go and find another job. And so where you go from people having jobs for like 20, 30 years, what is it now? 2-3 years on average before people move on. Again, that's both good and bad, I think. And I know that this is, not true for everybody, but I think there's been a change. I almost wonder whether the pendulum has swung too far from one side to the other. But I think employees expect a whole lot more from leadership now. And it's no longer just about the paycheck. It's about the culture, which for me is a big one. Finding employees that match our culture is massive. It's not even about competence anymore. For me, it's not about hiring the superstars. It's about hiring people that fit our culture. That's a big one for me. And I think if you can get employees that are a good cultural fit, they'll change your business for the better, and they'll work hard and they'll have insights. Because one of the benefits of the workplace shift is people feel like they can contribute more and that they can give more and that they have ideas and they should be heard and they could be heard. Do you know what I mean? And I really like that. I do really like that. So I don't know if that answers your question, Dennis. I feel like I've just gone off on one there.
No, I think you're spot on. You're so right. I mean, employees expect so much more from leaders now. You're totally right. And yeah, the expectation has been set for them. There's also the other side too, where I think that a lot of those, when I say those, millennials are looking for people and they're not finding strong enough leaders either. And because they're actually hungry, they're wanting to learn. And yeah, you're right. There are some who are wanting to be the CEO pretty quickly too. But there is those who are wanting to learn and go forward, and they're not really finding those strong enough leaders. And then if you couple that with what you've said as well, I think it's so right and so spot on that we need to sort of be aware of this and make sure that we're actually moving along with things too. Because lucky to have a job versus lucky to have me in your organization. I like how you've put that too, because even if you think about it today and what we're noticing as a result of the pandemic, they're calling this thing the Great Resignation, but we're seeing it a lot already, and people are deciding to move on. They've had enough of the pandemic, where it's woken them up a bit about life. They've also upskilled themselves throughout the period of time when they were in lockdown, and now they want to go off and do that kind of stuff, and good on them. And so for a lot of leaders, I always just say, they go to me, but I'm losing so many people, the attrition rate, and I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. But you know what? You've got a group of talented people still there. What are you doing to make sure you look after them and retain them? Because if you don't wake up and do that, they'll be gone as well. So, yeah, it's interesting to see how all that goes. And so, yeah, I think it's almost like the way I look at it, Matt, is, you know how in the real estate industry you've got a buyer's market and then you've got the seller's market, right? I think we've almost gone right now to the employees market. In other words, they're sort of holding things in their hand, but leaders also need to wake up a little bit too.
Yeah, they do. And I think you're right when you say that actually, you know, you've got to work hard to retain staff. So 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the assumption was you're here to stay. Do you know what I mean? I don't have to do anything to keep. I might give you a pay rise every 4 years and then I'm good. But I think you have to do an awful lot more now to retain people as leaders. And quite rightly so too. You know, I think it's important that people are treated as people rather than commodities. And I think if you're in a leadership positioning, if you're not actively retaining people, you will lose people.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, I'm going to get you to get your crystal ball out now and start thinking about the future here. Where do you see leadership being in 5 years?
I think for me, one of the things which has happened over the last few years, and I think it is on the whole has been a profoundly good thing, is the rise of awareness of a lack of diversity in the boardroom.
Yep.
And so, you know, a lack of female leadership, a lack of different cultural leadership. And we've seen that, and we've had awful lots of conversations about that. And I think over the next few years, we will reap the rewards of changes which we have put into place now going forward. And we will see an increase. I'm hoping we will see an increase of female leadership and leadership, from the BAME community and all that sort of stuff. We will hopefully see that come in more and more. And there'll be more and more opportunities around that. I'm really excited by it. I mean, I predominantly worked in a company with women. I mean, our first real e-commerce business was beauty. So I had to employ women. Do you know what I mean? We had to have a leadership board, which was female. Super excited for the world that brings everybody together, where everybody can work together as opposed to disparately in their own silos, but where we can work together and bounce ideas off each other. And I think that will be an amazing thing to happen. And that's what I'm hoping will happen. My fear is the quality of leadership is going to decline. And I say this because I think this is what is happening at the current stand. I think the quality of leadership is declining quite rapidly because leadership changes quite massively. And I think people aren't keeping up, and I think people don't feel like it's worth it. And so I think the quality of good, honest, authentic, transparent, humble leadership is sadly lacking right now. And this is part of the reason why I think we need a diversity in the boardroom. If I'm honest with you. And I hope that I'm wrong.
No, I think you're right. I think and I totally agree with you. I think we need it. And I've worked in organizations whereby in the HR space, and it's been very predominantly females as well, and great to work with. Bring so many great ideas, bring balance to the room. It's really wonderful to see. And so, yeah, I think it's right. And yeah, the other one I thought when you said about the fear, but the real authentic, transparent, vulnerable, humble kind of leader, that is really, really needed, big time. But then I also hope that we don't sort of just use the diversity as a tick in the box, and we're bringing people in and we're not bringing the right talent in and the right people based on what you've just said there too. So there's that balance between both of them. I think it's really, really important.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think of my kids, and I think I just wonder what they're going to go into. Do you mean as in the workforce? And I wonder what my grandkids will go into in the workforce if culture carries on and society carries on the route and self-destructive path that it seems to be on in a lot of these areas. Hopefully I'm not being a prophecy of doom or anything like that. I'm just being a realist that I just think there's so much self-destructive behavior. There is so much polarization happening, certainly in America and in the UK to some extent now. And the whole cancel culture thing is just stopping conversation dead in its track. And it's the wrong kind of leadership. For me, leaders aren't people that say, I'm not going to talk to you because I disagree with your political view. A leader's going to go, I want to sit down and have a cup of coffee with you because I want to have a conversation. I want to see this from a different point of view, because that's humble. That's humility. It's an arrogance which says, no, I've got it right. You're wrong. Therefore you're worthless as a human being. And I struggle with it. Whether it's the left or the right, whether it's political or what, it doesn't matter. That, for me, I think needs to change.
Well, I think it goes back to something you said earlier on. People want to be heard. And that's not just heard from one side. It has to be heard from both sides, from all areas. And having that ability to sit down, have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and have that chat is missing. And we do definitely need to do that, but also listen to each other too. So, yeah. Hey, Matt, thank you so much for joining us on today's show. If our listeners are wanting to get hold of you, where should they go?
Great. Yeah. The best place to get hold of me is through my website, mattedmundson.com. All the links to all my social media is on there, but I'm on Instagram as @MattEdmundson. I'm on LinkedIn. Just search for Matt Edmundson and I'll be on there. But yeah, just mattedmundson.com and everything will be linked from there. It's like magic.
Nice. Very good. Matt, once again, hey, absolute pleasure talking with you today. So thank you for being on the show.
I really appreciate it, Dennis. Really enjoyed this conversation about leadership. So thank you.
Thank you. Hey, listeners, what we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Change is incredibly scary, especially with the unknown and unfamiliar territory. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing. Hey, look out for the episodes as they've been released. Download them, have a listen, put a review and a rating. Share them with your friends, your family, your network. If there's any feedback you'd like to give me, please send me an email on dennis@leadingchangepartners.com. That's feedback on the show, or if you have a question for the Ask Dennis Freestyle episode. If you haven't already checked out the Facebook group or the LinkedIn page, Leadership is Changing, come along. We'd love to see you at those different sort of communities. Hey, listeners, it's always a pleasure being with you. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.